Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to my new series, Late Nights in the NBA. I'm calling it my new series. It's a very just loose. I kind of want to talk about basketball and not really edit it, and just kind of specifically talk about something I watched like tonight, like the night that I'm recording it, or maybe something I've been thinking about for a little bit that like it's been culminating in like a game that happened tonight. As you can see by the thumbnail and the title, tonight's clearly about the Mavericks and the Kyrie Irving trade and Luka Doncic. But I just want to really quickly wanted to explain what this series was and what's going to look like. Yeah, it's just going to be chill, very uncut, kind of like Kenny for real. If you watch KOT4Q, repping his merch as well. Shout out Kenny for real. Kind of like that. I just want to be able to talk ball and talk freely and just off the dome about some stuff that I've been thinking about. So I watched the second half of the Mavericks Timberwolves game. I wasn't able to tune in until the second half because I was watching the Bulls lose to the Magic in embarrassing fashion. Shout out Dalen Terry though, no lie. Shout out Dalen Terry. He was hooping tonight, and Stacey Keem was right. You need to give the young guy minutes, Billy Donovan, because he just makes a difference. He just brings another energy, and you could just tell, even just like the small plays, he was happy to be making them. So yeah, shout out Dalen Terry, but the rest of the Bulls, man, other than Io and Dalen Terry, I don't really know what you guys are doing. But no. So I'm here to talk about. I watched the second half of the Mavericks Wolves game, and if you didn't tune in, it was actually a very entertaining game. Or specifically, the second half was. I didn't watch the first half, but coming into the second half, the Mavericks were down 11, and then later in the third, they were down by. I think the score was they were down by 26 to the Wolves. Kyrie Irving comes in and he starts. I can't remember if it was the end of the third or the start of the fourth. It kind of blended together for me a little bit in my head. But Kyrie Irving comes in and Luka comes out. It is the start of the fourth because Luka sits at the end of the third. They bring him out as the third quarter ends. And the Mavericks are sort of starting him out to come back, but they're not entirely back in the game. Start of the fourth quarter, Kyrie Irving erupts. He had, let me double check. Kyrie had 36 points tonight, and 26 of those came in the fourth quarter. He was just absolutely erupting in the fourth quarter. He couldn't be stopped. And if you were watching it, he was just... It felt like there was nothing the Timberwolves could do. And there was one thing, actually, I wanted to note about Kyrie that was, like, exceptional that he did tonight. He had 5 rebounds. And I know on the season, I'm also going to really quickly double check before I just talk out of my ass. He's averaging 5 rebounds per game, which is good for a point guard, but doesn't blow you away. And that's why nobody talks about. Nobody talks about Kyrie Irving rebounding. Nobody talks about Kyrie Irving's rebounding because he only averages 5 a game. But if you watch like these games, Kyrie Irving is like a good rebounder. He gets important rebounds. And there was a lot of possessions tonight, or there was like 2 or 3 in the fourth quarter that I can remember, where Irving or somebody else would take a shot, it would miss, and Irving's right there. He's fighting with Naz Reid. He's fighting with Rudy Gobert. He's fighting with Jaden McDaniels. He's in the paint, like grabbing the board over them, tipping it back in, and it's just like, it's insane how well he's positioning himself, and also just how much effort and hustle he was putting in. He really just like the Kyrie that we know that can turn it on, that was in full effect tonight. And it showed why the Mavericks made a trade like this. Because there were moments where, like, during the third, well, not really during the third, during the fourth, Luka would come up the court and he would just dump off to Kyrie and he would just chill. And they would score. They would get like a good possession. They'd get something out of it. And that's not a luxury that Luka really had before this trade. It's a luxury he had to a certain extent with Jalen Brunson last year. Of course, we're not going to act like Jalen Brunson is like this year. He is. He's been good. No disrespect to Jalen Brunson this year. We're not going to act like Jalen Brunson last year was half the player that Kyrie Irving is, respectfully. So Kyrie Irving's gravity on offense and his ability to create on offense, it is showing its value immediately for this Mavericks team. However, they could not defend for shit. Respectfully, they could not defend for shit in that fourth quarter. Kyle Anderson had, I think, 10 fourth quarter points tonight. On like the slowest jumpers, the slowest drives to the basket, the weakest takes, they just couldn't defend. And it's because they didn't have the bodies out there to defend. When Josh Green wasn't on the court, and even sometimes when he was, they didn't have any defensive personnel on the court. They were running lineups of like Kyrie Irving, Jaden Hardy. There was a line. This was the exact lineup, I'm pretty sure. Kyrie Irving, Jaden Hardy, Reggie Bullock, Theo Pinson, and like Frank Ntilikina or Dwight Powell. If either one of those two in like that lineup has no like real positive defenders on the court. So yeah, this team is feeling the lack of Dorian Finney-Smith. This team is feeling the lack of Dorian Finney-Smith, and it's also feeling the lack of Spencer Dinwiddie, which is like kind of weird to say because Spencer Dinwiddie isn't all that great of a defender. But when you look at this roster, you think, hey man, Spencer Dinwiddie's tall, and so he's like automatically kind of an all right defender, and that's something this team needs. You need somebody out there who can play defense because once again, like I said, Kyle Anderson was cooking this team. He cooked this team for 10 points in the fourth quarter. Then he had like a clutch stop on Luka and then a clutch offensive rebound that really sealed the game or really came close to sealing the game. And that's when I kind of thought it was over. But then the Mavericks had a chance. They came down and it was a 3-point game. Yeah, I believe. Yeah. It was a 3-point game. The Mavericks have one final shot. They have an inbound with like 15 seconds left. They don't really have an inbounds action, so they throw a bad inbounds to Luka, which goes backcourt. Luka gets it. He gets up court though with like this blue light from the NBA game. Sorry. He gets up court with like 11 or 10 seconds left. Enough time for the Mavericks action that they were calling up, at least some of it or something to happen. And all that happens is Luka and Kyrie just kind of like do like a couple dribbles, drive, and then kick to each other back and forth until they force a shot that doesn't go in, and the Mavs don't go to overtime. But it was just embarrassing. And there was no play. There was nothing set up. And this was a problem that happened in the Kings game the other night that the Mavs lost. You now have two just insanely like talented offensive creators, which I know does make it tempting to be like, well, we could just give them the ball and they could do whatever, because most of the time Kyrie and Luka have shown, yeah, they can just do whatever. But with those two offensive players, your end of game strat should not be a Luka Doncic step back or a Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic dribble off, you know? Jason Kidd has to develop more dynamic of an offense. On a positive note, though, like I said, Kyrie Irving looked amazing. Like, I don't know if people would agree with me. That fourth quarter is the best he's looked all season to me. He looked so invested in the Mavs too, which I know that quote came out earlier about him saying, I don't want to talk about re-signing, which if I'm a Mavs fan, it's not a great night for me. Taking this loss and then reading that quote, not the best night, but Kyrie looked good, so hey, maybe you could win a championship. No, maybe you could be good this year, and maybe then he decides, maybe I don't want to go to LA with Bron, even though that probably won't happen. But like I said, we're focusing on the positive. Kyrie Irving looked awesome tonight. Looked like the best he's looked all season, in my opinion. Josh Green looked really awesome. He had these really like nice finishes at the basket. He had some shots he was throwing a little like light, but also he just had a lot more aggression than I've seen Josh Green have. In the fourth quarter, he had more aggression than I think I'm used to, and I just liked seeing that from Josh Green. I went to the U of A during Josh Green's year at the U of A, and I said during that year, the big prospect actually coming in to that freshman class was Nico Mannion. Josh Green and Nico Mannion were our two prospects, but people were kind of higher on Nico Mannion. And I remember saying, no, Josh Green, That guy's just got like, he's going to be an NBA player. He's going to be a better NBA player because he's more like set to be an NBA player. And I got to be honest, it took a little bit longer than I expected. But this is like the version of Josh Green I kind of imagined, like a defensive beast who can kind of beast is maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but like a defensive stud who can shoot and create a decent amount for himself on offense. And I understand why the Mavericks value him so much. You know, if the Raptors called me and said, we'll give you OG Anunoby for Josh Green and like a pick, then maybe we start valuing Josh Green a little bit less. But I understand he has a lot more potential than he's even at right now, but he's damn good right now. But all of this has me thinking, like, the Mavericks are now 2-2 with Kyrie Irving and 0-2 with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving playing together. I'm not putting that much stock into the fact that they lost the 2 games that Luka and Kyrie played together, because they did play the Kings and they did play the Wolves. They've played in those 4 games, they've played like good teams. It was the Kings twice, the Clippers, and the Wolves. Those are all pretty good teams, and especially for an adjustment period for 2 incredibly ball dominant and incredibly offensively talented players. I understand it's going to take time for them to work it out, so I'm not too worried about that. Like, what I am worried about though is the Mavericks showed some very obvious holes tonight that I don't think are going to get better. You know, that Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic play at the end, it maybe could get better. I actually don't know how much I believe in Jason Kidd. I'm willing to give him a second postseason run, though, to see if it does get better. But I don't think the defense is going to get better. Jason Kidd coached a very impressive defense last year, but he's done that every year. Like, every team he's gone to, his first year he's coaching an incredibly impressive defense that has immediately fallen off. And then as well, the Mavericks lost a lot of defensive pieces. They lost Spencer Dinwiddie, and Dorian Finney-Smith is showing his value, like, to fans as one of the most valuable and like talented defensive role players, 3-and-D even role players in the NBA. And I'm not saying if you have the opportunity to make a trade for a guy like Kyrie Irving that you keep Dorian Finney-Smith instead. But I'm saying that this is a team that it's very hard to lose a player like Dorian Finney-Smith on. It was hard to lose a player like Jalen Brunson, so to get a player like Kyrie Irving that can exceed what Jalen Brunson was doing, but, you know, fulfill, and once again, not comparing Kyrie Irving to Jalen Brunson, but fulfill that secondary ball handler, secondary creator role, having another player who can be an offensive threat and offensive creator is very important. But losing that Swiss Army knife, that 3-and-D defensive stud you had, really hurts. And it's really showing for this team because they look bad defensively. And I don't see many avenues for them to get better. I don't see many players in the buyout market that are going to get them better. So I'm looking at this potential buyout market. Patrick Beverley is an avenue to get better defensively. You know, I wouldn't hate that signing for him. It would actually be pretty good. There hasn't been any connections to him, so I don't know if it's going to happen. I probably actually don't see it happening, but that would be a good signing. And then, I don't know, when I look at this, like, Corey Joe, George Hill, Dwayne Dedmon, like, Serge Ibaka. Well, Dwayne Dedmon did just get signed to the 76ers. Serge Ibaka, like, none of these names move me enough to say that these players would make the Mavericks better. So, I got to be honest. I don't know if the Mavericks this year are a championship team. I think that I can't rule them out. I think barring, like, if injuries happen, if the Mavericks hit a hot streak, you have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. You showed last year that with a relatively similar core that is once again missing Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie, that you could make a conference finals run. So it's hard for me to say that you couldn't do the same again this year. But in a Western Conference that has a team like the Denver Nuggets, the Phoenix Suns, and the Golden State Warriors are healthy, they could possibly be clicking again. Like, when you look at those teams, I don't see how this Mavericks team is going to beat them. Like, defensively, they just don't stand a chance. And those other teams have offensive threats that they can't match the production of Kyrie and Luka. But when you look at the Nuggets, they have like 3 or 4 offensive threats. You look at the Suns, they have 3 or 4 offensive threats. You look at the Warriors, they have like 2, 3, depending on the night, 4 offensive threats. The Mavericks really have Kyrie and Luka. Sometimes THJ is hitting. Christian Wood is I need to see him in the playoffs, but he's been pretty consistent for this Mavericks team, so I'll give them that they have like a third offensive threat. But I'm just saying that other teams in the playoffs could potentially not outgun the Mavericks, but keep up to them, in the fact that they're going to be able to play better defense in the clutch than the Mavericks are, because this Timberwolves team, Anthony Edwards wasn't even creating as much as he should in that fourth quarter. You can't stop that Timberwolves team in the fourth quarter. How are you going to stop the Suns with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Chris Paul? How are you going to stop Nikola Jokic? They are not going to stop Nikola Jokic with the big men on this team. They just defensively, there's too many questions on this team for me to say that the Mavericks are real contenders right now. So I don't know what's next for the Mavericks or what the ceiling is, but I'm just saying this Kyrie Irving trade could go down as the trade that I'm not going to say that actually. I'm not going to say that this is. I do not think this trade would be the reason that Luka Doncic leaves the Mavericks. I don't know if I even think the Luka Doncic will leave the Mavericks one day. He's only like 23, coming up on 24, so I'm not going to get to that yet. But this trade could potentially blow up in the Mavericks' face pretty bad, and that'd be really unfortunate because this is a very fun offensive duo, and Kyrie in Dallas seems like a pretty good fit if they can work out the role players around him. But that's all for my first episode of Late Nights in the NBA. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.